All right, welcome. This is the introduction to the initial accreditation pathway. This pathway is a 5-year pathway that was developed by the request of some of the states, as a matter of fact, so that we can help everyone transition a little bit into AAQEP and the AAQEP standards. So I'm going to give you a big overview. As I'll mention at the very end, we do have webinars that walk you through the details of the initial accreditation pathway so that you can write the report for it. So I am Linda McKee. I think I know the people, everyone who is on right at this moment. So welcome. I am the Chief Operations Officer and one of the co-founders for AAQEP. So I really like to welcome everyone, and I enjoy having the opportunity to meet you and to talk with you. So we do an introduction to AAQEP webinar, and I know a few of you were with me yesterday when we did that, but I just wanted to mention the fact that that is always available on our website. You can go to the public webinars and view whatever is up as the most recent one. But for all of these webinars, when you register for them, you do receive a link to the webinar, and you also will receive a copy of the slide deck. But you can go right there. You can see that. Again, this one is the initial accreditation report. But once you become a member, you will see that there's writing the initial accreditation report also. So that does give you a much more detailed overview of the components and the requirements for the initial accreditation report. And again, that webinar recording is available for people who are members. So today's agenda, we'll talk very briefly about the AAQEP approach, because I know the majority of you were with me yesterday, but I'll cover that, a little bit about the expectations, because there are some things that are different for the expectations for the 5-year and the 7-year. And then I'll talk about the reports and the site visits, and then I'll end with the AAQEP community, because that is a piece of the AAQEP that I think is one of the most exciting pieces that we've created with everyone in the field. If you have any questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat. I will have a difficult time seeing them while I'm speaking in the chat, but if you'll save them to the end, I'll look at all those at the end, and we will stop the recording at the end so that I can answer your questions, and you can have a little bit of privacy with those questions. Having said all that, the AAQEP approach, I'll get started with this. So we had 8 design principles when we first started. They are operational principles now, because we are moving into our 10th year, just completed our 9th year. The first one is collaboration. And this is really talking about how do we all work together, breaking down the silos, not just silos, breaking down silos in your community, but also breaking down silos in the whole P20 community. So how are we working together? We have the monthly cohorts, and we also bring people together in some of our events so that we have an opportunity to talk with everyone. And you have an opportunity then to talk with people from around, not just around the nation, but even potentially around the world. Innovation is an important part of the continuous improvement cycle. And so we've been very open to innovation, and really hope that you have an opportunity to look at your data, do an analysis of the data, and then make some decisions about perhaps the things that you want to change. And improvement science, which has been guiding a lot of the process with AAQEP, improvement science says adopt, adapt, or abandon. So that's one of the things that we could think about when we're looking at innovations, is not only what do we want to adopt, if something new, but maybe we want to adapt some things, and maybe there's some things that we need to just stop doing. So the partnerships are, of course, not only partnerships that would be with other providers around the nation, but also partnerships with national organizations. And, we really try to help you to build those partnerships, and we try to sustain them ourselves. Comprehensiveness, this is across the board. If anyone, any institution, any provider is creating a program for educator preparation, then they have an opportunity to go through our quality assurance process. The context is extremely important, and this is your context. We ask that you describe this context right at the very beginning of your report, along with your institutional mission. And then, of course, your evidence is going to show how you are addressing that context. But we want to ensure that everyone who is reading that report is aware of your specific context. Consistency across the board is one of our principles that I push pretty hard, because I believe in that calibration, and that what is good for one is good for all the others. And so we want to make certain that we are making those decisions based on consistency. Efficiency, we are a virtual company, and we try our best to be very frugal in the use of your membership dues. In fact, when we get to the end of this particular webinar, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the supports that come because of your membership dues that are available to you. But everything that we do, we try to be very efficient with that. And we listen to what you say about that efficiency. And the sharing, it would be about the really looking at a broad dissemination of not only what you have determined and some of your work. We have a couple books that are out that have been supported by AAQEP. And then we share across the cohorts. It's one of the things that I've always loved about the cohorts is that when someone comes to a cohort, they could be asking their colleagues, what was the evidence that you put forward for 3E? What did you do for a rubric that really is talking about professional dispositions? Do you have anything that we could share? And it is always a support system in place, a professional learning community that supports each other. So having said that, AAQEP does have two pathways. This particular webinar is about the 5-year accreditation pathway. This pathway was created by the request of a state who was helping the provider to do a transition into the 7-year. And so the 5-year accreditation pathway has become extremely popular for this transition. It is a maximum of 5 years and can be used one time only. That is right at the very beginning. It is created for programs that are newly authorized, brand new programs with state approval, or programs that are transitioning into AAQEP. So they would be transitioning maybe from another QA system, or even transitioning from not having accreditation at all. The difference is that a 7-year pathway, which at the end of the 5 years, you would transition into the 7-year. And then that becomes recurring. You stay with the 7-year pathway. That, of course, is the maximum of 7 years. And that is the one that is, it's available to anyone. You can transition straight into the 7-year if you decide to do so. But the 5-year accreditation pathway is to give you a scaffolding. So the initial accreditation pathway really is looking at, again, a review of the evidence. All of the standards and all the aspects are addressed in the initial accreditation pathway. They're just addressed in a little bit different way. This is to ensure that the institution or the provider is meeting fundamental quality requirements. That is part of the responsibility of the Accreditation Commission. It's available for those newly launched programs as they're just starting to build those data sets. And the value of that is because there's sometimes when, especially as a newly launched program or even as a program that is transitioning from another system, you may find that you don't have the data set specific for perhaps a particular aspect. So this is an opportunity then for you to write an action plan and give us very specific details about how you are going to collect that data in the future, including your measures, your criteria for success, and any other documentation that you would have. So it's a great transition time for you. It also helps you then to realign to those new standards. So you may have already been comfortable with another set of standards. And even though there's a lot of similarity in accreditation, each accreditor has their own specific areas that are, just to their system. And so this gives you an opportunity to really address those. The initial accreditation pathway, which is, again, the 5-year, it is non-renewable. So at the max, you would have this for 5 years, which means that by the 4th year, you're already looking at how do we transition into the 7-year, just because of the timing. Obviously, you have to have the 7-year completed for the site visit within 5 years of the time of the site visit for the initial accreditation. So, and just for clarity on what I just said, because it even sounded confusing to me, is that you will have the initial accreditation decision. Then within the 5 years of the site visit for that, you would be holding the site visit for the 7 years. So just so that you know that that's the 5-year time frame. There is one state that has a different timeline, and that is Ohio. So if you are from Ohio, reach out to me so I can help you with that particular one. These are commonalities to both the 5-year and the 7-year. The local practitioner is someone who is you select as the provider. That is the person that will complete the reviewer training. They will sign a confidentiality agreement, and then they are a complete member of the review team. So they will be working with the review team to look at the report, to make some decisions about the report, to document any information, to be a part of the interviews, the focus groups that happen during the site visit. And then they will also help to write the report that goes to the commissioners. So their communication with you will be very limited during that period of time. But they are the expert about your program and even the state, perhaps. Because remember, we're bringing people from a lot of other different states, maybe other areas. And so, this is a person who knows and can tell us a lot about what's happening, maybe what's happening in Texas, what's happening in Illinois, what's happening in New Jersey or Delaware. So that's a person who really has a better understanding of that. And we do have some guidance about that on our website to help you with that. And I'm also happy to help you and have a conversation about it. We always have a small team. It is a reasonably sized team that has a small footprint, especially when on site. We try to compact that time by having more virtual meetings both before and after. One of the things that is very different with AAQEP is that our teams do not give any judgment or recommendations. This is where we feel like this is a professional discussion, a conversation as colleagues. They're there to collect evidence that they may feel is necessary and perhaps not in the report, but they're also there to affirm the evidence that is in your report. So when they write their final report that you will see before it goes to the commissioners, then that report is written in a very objective framework. So no judgment, no recommendations. Only the accreditation commissioners do a judgment of any type. This does lead to a very timely and extremely transparent, because you'll be invited to this virtual decision meeting. It's usually about 3 months after the visit itself, so it's pretty rapid. Expectations that are common to both pathways, and this is our expectations framework. You'll see that it's the exact same framework that you would encounter if you were going to do the 7-year, because you still have to address all the standards and all the aspects. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that you address all the aspects for both pathways, but for both pathways also is that the commissioners make the decision by the standard. So you want to be sure that you're giving the information for the aspect, the evidence for the aspect, so that they can see the evidence for the entire standard. As you can see across the board with those standards, foundational expectations would be standard 1. That's pretty much the knowledge and skills that we're accustomed to addressing that in educator prep. And standard 3 is the one that is the program practice, and that is the quality program practices. In the initial accreditation pathway, standards 3 and 4 are the ones that there's a lot of strength in those. So as I talk through that, you want to really pay attention to those in particular. Standards 1 and 2 are addressed a little bit differently for completer performance. So a little bit different in the initial accreditation pathway. So bear with me and I'll walk us through that. So standard 1, completer foundation and skills. Now here is the standard itself, but you'll be able to see all this also in our guide. Our guide also will give you a good idea about the descriptors about how this could be approached with initial accreditation, with initial teacher preparation, with advanced preparation. That could be your ed leadership, your administration, et cetera. So, and also some of the specialized programs. So here, this would be the 7 aspects that would be for standard 1. Now I'm skimming through these a little bit faster than I did yesterday, but if you have an opportunity to look at the webinar that was yesterday, if you didn't have a chance to join us, you'll see I tried to talk about these in a little more detail. But I will say that if you join in and want to walk through the report writing webinar, then they'll go into much more detail about all of these. But they're pretty straightforward for standard 1. Standard 2, completer professional growth and adaptability. You'll recognize some of these also, but these aspects, some of them are just a little bit different than what they were over the years. Obviously, those relationships with families, guardians, and caregivers So with standard 2, we're talking about not only what you're doing in the program, but also how do we know that that's happening when they're in the field. So this could require a little bit different qualitative methods, research methods that you could be doing. At some point you may want to integrate more interviews, focus groups. It's probably not going to be as successful if we are dependent on surveys only for some of this work. So with standard 1, we know that we have a little more quantitative data for that. Standard 2, some quantitative data, but you might want to expand on both of these with some qualitative research methods. So again, these go through the all 7 here. I will say, just to ensure that everyone is aware of this, that the word diverse is in 2B, 2C. That is, you explain what diverse means to you. It's best to put a glossary together for your report and explain what diverse means to you in your context. So moving through those, standards 1 and 2 in the initial accreditation pathway. So it really focuses on the outcomes assessment system. That's what we're looking for more with standards 1 and 2 is the overall assessment system. And I'm going to go in a little more detail about that in just a moment for you also. This is where you'll document that alignment. Look at the alignment of your data sources, whatever those would be. Again, quantitative or qualitative research. And align them to the aspects. Each aspect should have something aligned to it. If not, then there would be an action plan on what you're going to do to get that information. Obviously, you want to have those copies of each source. That would be, you can link them in your report. You'll see how we'll talk about that in a moment. The one, I have that red bold of how the data quality will be investigated and documented. We really want to have an idea about that plan. Exactly what have you done and what do you plan to do to move forward with that investigation of your data quality for all the instruments, in particular your locally developed instruments. And then you can discuss the data analysis, talk about what you're going to do with the data analysis. But the important one is that last bullet. This is where it's very different for the initial accreditation pathway. The outcome evidence need not be reported. We really want to have an idea about what you're putting in place. This is the scaffolding part of it. What are you putting in place in order to start collecting that data to ensure that you really are following, with that evidence, really considering over the next couple of years, what are you going to do? Gives you a great opportunity to make some changes and revisions. So think about that. If you have the outcome evidence and you want to report it, you can do so, but it will probably not be a part of the decision-making process. But it's a great opportunity to start documenting it. So the evidence set expectations would be multiple measures, obviously a minimum of the triangulation. The multiple perspectives that would be especially in standards 1 and 2. For within the standard, there's 7 aspects. Somewhere in those 7 aspects, you would want to measure that is from program faculty, a measure from P12 partners, a measure from program completers, and your graduates' employers. So think about how you're going to collect that. More than a survey, though it could be if you're getting really good return rates, but also think about other ways that you could be collecting that information. And then, as always, this is very common, again, across the board to all accreditors, the direct performance measures. You can use licensure, certification, exam results, any data gathered by the state if it's available. And then, of course, within the report, you'll do that disaggregation. So that's the breakdown that is always required. There is an instrument rationale and data use table. And I'm really happy that I was able to get through that entire title. So for each measure, you'll identify, and this table is available for you on our website. I apologize on that. There are a couple of tables that are required and they are available on the website. And when you go through writing the initial accreditation report or even the quality assurance report, you will find in the webinars, you will find that they are noting the ones that are required and then samples. So there are a lot of tables that are sample tables, but there are a couple that are required. And the instrument rationale and data use table is a required table. So this, what you'll do is you'll identify your rationale. Why are you using that particular measure? You'll also give us the criteria for success. You have determined We're not going to tell you what that is. Just for an example, you may have a criteria for success that is either yours in the program, it may be the institutions or the states, that could be the GPA in order to enter your program. So that's an admission requirement. What is that criteria for success? We do not tell you what that is. You may have a 4 out of 5 as criteria for success on rubrics, but another rubric may be 3 out of 5. So you tell us what it is, and then your evidence will start showing whether, and the quality of it on having met that criteria. There'll obviously be a link to those measures, and then obviously, especially those locally developed measures, but you'll want to link the proprietary measures also. An alignment of the measures to the aspects, that's going to be in the table. When the measure was last reviewed for data quality, so you don't want to review every single one every single year, even on a pattern of every 2 to 3 years, but you do want to have a sequence of when they are reviewed. And there's a lot of ways to set that priority for how you're going to review those. And then, of course, how are you going to use the measure, and how are you going to analyze the measure? So that's giving us an idea, even again, maybe a little bit of a process map or an action plan on how you're going to do that. That falls also into those plans for investigating the data quality, which goes back to the other bullet that I was talking about when it was last reviewed. So looking at those plans. So which measures are you going to use when, and how are you going to ensure that you've investigated the quality, the data quality, which would be the validity, reliability, the fairness, and the trustworthiness, including the trustworthiness for any qualitative measures. So again, a lot of detail in our guide, and also in our webinar that is on writing the initial accreditation report. So now we're moving into standard 3, which is really looking at quality program practices. This is the internal quality controls, and there's a lot of things that would be in this particular standard. So I'm going to break them down a little bit more, but it really is talking about the capacity. How do you have the capacity to do what you say you're doing? This comes up with a lot of issues about the governance structure and about the clinical experiences and things like that. So let's walk through that a little bit. So you're looking at 3A, which would be the recruitment. Sometimes we forget about the recruitment in educator prep because many times we're more dependent on maybe the institution doing some of the recruitment and they move in. But what are we doing for recruitment? The admissions and formative support. How are we helping them to move through the program successfully? The coherent curricula is common across accreditors. We're familiar with that. This is aligned to relevant standards. We only require 2 sets of standards. One is the state. You have to have the state standards aligned. And then the other would be AAQEP, obviously. If you are using InTask or ISTE or any of the others, that would be NACE or something like that, please, if it helps you, put those into the report. But they're not required. So that's your decision on what you want to do. Only the 2 required. And then, of course, the 3C, 3D, the clinical experiences. I will say about documented effective partnerships. We have a tendency to have partnerships where we may be placing some of our candidates and completers into the field. How do we know that they are effective partnerships? What's the evaluation that we're doing in order to collect that information? 3E, you'll see, has that red font again, because this is one that catches people a lot. It's that effective assessment system. The data quality in particular. 3E is really a large aspect to address because it is talking about the data quality. So I'm going to go through that and with a few slides just to help a little bit with that particular one. 3F is the internal quality control system, ensuring that you're giving Susie and Johnny the exact same support throughout, that they are responding to all the documents that are necessary, that they, when the licensure application comes, that you are prepared to sign that because they've completed everything. And they have been given the same support throughout the entire program. And 3G is really looking at a parity table. That is that capacity for quality and institutional commitment. So how do we know that your candidates and completers have the exact same support systems in place? That's the governance structure that we're looking for. And again, there's some sample tables available for you on our website and also in our guide. So you can look at those. But I do want to address aspect 3E because it seems to be one that is really catching people a little bit off guard with some of the information they're putting in the report. And so I thought that I'm just going to pull this one out and start talking about it a little bit more. It's extremely important to investigate the data quality. Now, we've been doing this for a period of time in educator prep, but I'm not positive we're doing it in the depth that really is giving us the information that we need with some of our instruments. So, we really have to have that confidence in the data. We want to look at that calibration and rating. And we're talking about inter-rater reliability with that, to ensure that whoever's using the instrument, that reliability is there. We're talking about the fairness for the candidates, which goes back to what I was just mentioning about, with 3G in particular, so the bias and those discrepancies and all in the reports. The accuracy of your decisions that you're making and the evaluations that are being presented as a source of evidence. Thinking about shared professional judgment with your partners, bringing the partners in and having them a part of the whole process. And then, of course, you've got the star down there. It says, don't do things that don't make sense. So I'm hoping that there are no English teachers with me today, but it really is just, do things that do make sense, okay? If something isn't working anymore, if a rubric no longer meets the needs, change it. We would prefer that you change the information, change the evidence that you're collecting. If it is not giving you what you need, it could be that you're getting some, new assessments from the state. It could be that there are new components that you have to address. So make those changes in your instruments and in your measures that address the new areas. Don't be concerned about a particular timeline of a data set that you need. We really would prefer that you present what you have, tell us that you're going to make the changes, make those changes, and present anything that you may have after that. It's much better for all of us if we start making those revisions and innovations. Always improving together is exactly what we're talking about. So these aspects of data quality, the evidence regarding your assessment should be appropriate to this. And this is just a slide to help you a little bit. It'll be available for you. You'll see it multiple times throughout, so that you have an idea of exactly what do we mean by data quality. So really looking at all of that information available. And again, it could be that you have some of it done. Could be even maybe you did something for the last couple of years with some measures. You're working on some at this point. You may have some that you're looking at in the future. Just give us an action plan or give us some documentation of all that across the board. We're not looking for it all to be done all at once. We're looking for that what needs to be done and are giving us an idea, a plan of how you're doing that. So again, keeping in mind that change the assessments if they're needed, change the measures if it's needed. So make some adjustments accordingly. So standard 4, program engagement. This is the P20 education system. This is really trying to bring us all together again. How are we working together so that it's, we're thinking about as everything that we need for our students, for our schools, for the, everyone in the field, including everyone who would be in your education preparation program. So how do you engage with partners to support high needs, to investigate and plan the improvement? So how are they a part of your plan? Expand that advisory council so you have more people involved. How are you supporting your completers going into the career and staying in the career? Obviously, we all know that, retention is the best way to recruit. So how are we keeping them in the career? How are we supporting them with that? How are we working with our partners to meet local and state workforce needs and to diversify the educator workforce? And then using the publicly available data and the state or jurisdiction mandates. So really thinking about what is available for us to use. The state or jurisdiction mandates would be the state approval letter. That would be anything that maybe that state in particular is requiring that is over and above what we're doing with our 4 standards. So a lot more detail for that one also. But this is the thing that I really stress that is also different with the initial accreditation pathway. Standards 1 and 2 are addressed by the measures being presented to make the case, aligning those measures and the elements of those measures to the aspects. And again, using that table. And with the table providing that explicit rationale, success criteria that you have determined, and the quality guarantees for each instrument or evidence source. So really talking about how are you going to put forth the evidence, and then what you'll do is if you then you will determine how you're going to do that analysis in the years coming. So that those years are the ones where you're really building that process. You're doing that scaffolding so that you're going into that deep analysis to present for the 7-year accreditation pathway. Standards 3 and 4 are the ones that are really the deep, deep meat for the accreditation pathway for the 5-year. This is a lot of documentation. This is not quite the same level of the measures. It's more documentation, but you still will do an analysis of that documentation. So you're looking at the curriculum alignment. Is it aligned? Do we need to make some changes? Do we need to look at, what are the courses and what is aligned to the different standards to ensure that all those standards are being addressed within your program? Looking at the faculty qualifications. The report will present that information, and the teams will do the check to ensure that the people who are teaching the courses are qualified to teach them. So it's a pretty straightforward there. And that is also used for institutional accreditation. And then, of course, those clinical partnership details. Now, there's a lot more in Standard 3 that I'm not addressing specifically in this particular slide, but I think that you are getting the idea that present the information. This is a lot of documentation, but you'll still want to do an analysis of that documentation. And if you've not started the analysis, or if you just are beginning it, then give us an idea about what you're going to do and how you're going to do that, because you have the next couple of years to follow through with that. And then, of course, providing that plan. Ongoing monitoring and the investigation of each program practice aspect. I'm looking at each one of those aspects and saying, well, this is what we're doing now. What are we doing moving forward? So thinking about that. So a lot more documentation and a lot more analysis of that documentation for standards 3 and 4. And that is really the strength of the initial accreditation pathway. So it's putting that foundation in place so that you are prepared to really use those measures for standards 1 and 2. And the commissioners really do look at what you have in standards 3 and 4 to support what you're going to do with standards 1 and 2. So there's the guide. You can download that at any time. It does give you gives you a great deal more detail than what I'm giving you at this moment. So I always do get the question about how many reports do we write? 1 or 2, 3. We've had 3 come in. So the IAR, that's the initial accreditation report. It's due 6 months prior to your site visit, the same as your 7-year report would. It is 9 months prior if you decide to do the optional completeness check, and that completeness check is on our website so that you can check that out yourself. I'll help you with your timeline if you need that. It will go into our accreditation management platform, and there's a link for that also, but I'll show you what the heat map looks like in just a moment again. Now, how many IRs do you write? Well, most of the time, people write one IAR that they can then expand into multiple QARs. That is your decision. So one IAR, if you have a very coherent evidence set across standards 1 and 2. That's the piece to keep in mind is with your assessment system, is it really focused on standards 1 and 2 so that you can have that one IAR? Most of the time, what you're doing in standards 3 and 4, especially standard 3, is going to be a little bit common. They're not 3B and 3C. You may have some differences there if you have a difference. But it really is looking at how do you do that disaggregation piece. If you are thinking about and do have different evidence sets, even different assessments, things that could be a different governance structure, that those would definitely call for multiple IARs. You may want to split that. And I will say that also we hear that a lot of the programs, they want to have the autonomy of getting the feedback for their particular program. Because when you put them in one IAR, the commission is going to look at all of them together for each standard, so that it's difficult to get individual feedback on a program that way. So it's something to take into consideration. Now, of course, you can do one IAR and then expand that into multiple quality assurance reports when you do the 7 years. So you're not locked into anything in that in particular. But here's the outline with the 2025 standards. Very straightforward. As I've mentioned before, that the writing the IAR is a webinar for you. Once you become a member, it's available so that you can watch that webinar and it'll walk you through these different pieces of the outline. One is introduction, completer performance, program practices. Conclusion is a piece that is a little bit different because this is where you are going to talk about your program strengths. This is giving us a chance to understand that you have really had these conversations. So your strengths, your opportunities, and your plans for growth. This could be where you integrate also any innovations that you may have determined that would be a good thing to test. It's not necessarily something that you will get locked into in any way. You have an opportunity to test it. So the review team queries. Now, what happens with your review team is that they're going to get your report. They'll talk about that. They'll take some notes. They will also come up with a list of clarification questions. Those questions then will be sent to you, and you will have an opportunity to respond to them in writing. You also will have an opportunity to speak with the team about those questions for clarification. But your responses will go to the commissioners. We want to ensure that they're not asking the exact same questions and that it helps them with clarity also about your report. So that's why that last piece is in there for that. It'll be uploaded so that the commissioners have an opportunity to see it. Here's the connection between the two reports. The IAR, with both of them, you'll address all aspects. Even though the commissioners will make the decision per standard, they will make it based on the evidence that would be addressing each aspect. With standards 1 and 2, the data reports are optional in the IAR, but the outcomes are reported with that analysis in the QAR. And then on standards 3 and 4 for the IAR, that's a gap analysis for standards 3 and 4. That's where you're going to make note of, you may find an area that you could improve. And you'll make note of that and really talk about how you're going to do that then. Standards 3 and 4, you're digging deeper into those practices, really looking at not just how are you improving, but what is it going to take to improve. Thinking about that. This is the accreditation management platform. You'll upload information. You can either write it on your own and then upload it into the heat map, or you can write directly into the heat map if that works and you want to have that. It is a secure workspace for you. No one can access this until you publish it and give everyone the availability for looking at it and reviewing it. So site visit logistics, a little bit of difference again about this because the IAR is a completely virtual site visit. And it is where the local practitioners, that's the same, the provider nominates, they are, we need to have that name and they need to start with their training 6 months before the site visit. So if it's necessary, we'll prompt you on a regular basis until we have that person, because that person is a part of the team. You'll have a logistics call with the director of accreditation services. She'll contact you about it may be 6 months out. In some cases, she's going all the way to a year out. Just depends, so that, to ensure that everything is set up. And she will talk about your scheduling at that time also. This is a virtual site visit for the IAR, not for the QAR necessarily, but definitely for the IAR. And one of the things to keep in mind is because it is virtual, people may be in different time zones. I held a meeting yesterday with people in 4 different time zones. So you have to think about maybe we need to have a different times throughout the day. Also, your candidates, completers, your employers, the people who the team will need to speak with them, they may be working all day and may only be available in the evening. So you'll meet with the review team to determine what that schedule will be. There is some guidance and some samples on our webpage for that in particular. It's on our site visit webpage. So you can, check that out just so that you can get prepared. You do want to be prepared to plan it out a good bit ahead of time because your dates will depend on some of the people, including your president or provost, that could be available. The decision, again, is virtual. All of our decisions are virtual. It's about 3 to 4 months after the site visit. The team lead is always invited to attend so that they can give the commissioners maybe some responses about something that may be in the report that they sent to them. The decision is effective immediately. You're going to hear the entire conversation. You'll be right there with a part of it. And they may ask you questions. So you want to be prepared for that. If you are one key person, then it may be that you'll want to bounce that question to someone that may have a better answer or maybe have more depth of an answer. And then the formative debriefing is a little bit different with the IAR. This does not happen with the 7-year, but after the decision with the IAR, then the commissioners stay on and they are available to answer any questions. This is a great opportunity for you. Maybe you heard something that they were questioning that was in the report that will help you to understand what was missing, or maybe there were some gaps that maybe something needed some clarity. That will help you with the next report. There may be something where you didn't understand exactly why they made a notation or a decision, and you can ask them and get a little more detail about that. So it's a great opportunity to stay on for that last 15 minutes, just to have that debriefing and ask questions. They're happy to help you with that. And then again, there's a state-specific timeline, but that one I'll work with anyone who needs that help. This is a timeline for the reviews. This is your timeline. If you look at this, you'll secure the site visit dates. All right, that's one of the things you'll want to do right off at the beginning. When you join, you'll receive a form that will ask you, some general ideas of when you want it, like the semester and the year. But you'll have to pin that down about a year out. So you'll want to make sure that you get those site visit dates across the board for everyone in your community. Then you'll turn in your self-study. You'll nominate the local practitioner about 6 months out. You'll attend the logistics call with our Director of Accreditation Services. And then you will also attend a provider meeting. So the provider meeting is when you are meeting with the quality review team. So that's where you can ask them questions, they can ask you questions, and you can plan the schedule. So that's going to be that's a great conversation to have. So you can have as many people on that conversation as you need to ensure that everyone knows what's happening. And then you'll host the site visit, again, completely virtual, which does work a little bit in your favor for some of those, the timing with the scheduling. And then the report will come to you from the quality review team before it goes to the commissioners, but then you'll attend the accreditation decision meeting after that. So here's our community. Those cohort calls that you'll be with people that are about the same timeline, most likely. We've got that repository available for you. We have member quarterlies, open forums, and the webinars. I've talked about these webinars as I've gone through this particular webinar. These are the ones about writing the proposal, the initial accreditation report, the QAR, which is the quality assurance report, site visit essentials, and writing the annual report. You'll want to watch those if you have any questions. They will help you guide you through the whole process. They're on demand, always free to members, and it really does help when you're just thinking about, now wonder what they meant by this. So a great opportunity to go in and watch those. We also have consulting that I will negotiate with you if you decide that you want it. That is very focused on your team only. When I do consulting, you can bring anyone to the table that is a part of your team. And we will determine an agenda of what it is that you'd like us to work through. We have the Quality Assurance Symposium, the workshops, the Institute. I'm going to talk about those very briefly in just a moment. And then, of course, the member resources. That's that repository, that member resources page. Go to that and really check it out. Those online workshops are offered about 3 times a year. Making the case for quality is talking about the standards and the evidence for the aspects. So that giving ideas. We do not tell you what the evidence is, but we're just going to give you some sample ideas, help you to walk through that and think about that. The ensuring data quality and equity is really looking at how can you do the data quality, again, validity, reliability, fairness, and trustworthiness, giving you some suggestions about how that you can do that. Those online workshops do have a cost to them, but it's discounted for members, open to anyone. We have consultation, which I mentioned that we can do in person, but there are also seminars that we offer that sometimes are at the Institute. When they're focused on the AAQEP process, we have 3 of them: framing the self-study, making the case for reaccreditation, which you may want to look at when you're moving forward into the 7-year, and then leadership, so getting started for the quality assurance process. The other seminars that we have, we call Quality Assurance for All, because these are across the board, things that anyone, not just going through accreditation, but anyone can come in with these. You do not need to be a member, but so you can share these with your colleagues. Designing assessment systems for continuous improvement, that will be at our institute. Data visualization and storytelling, we're offering in Maryland this year as a one-time thing, but it is quite frequently in our institute. Leading quality improvement is a leadership model for this process. What happens after you have that decision and moving forward? And then mapping your quality assurance process, really giving you a model of how to map the process so that you can take that back to your team and think about how would we do that. So we have 2 national events. One is the AAQEP Institute that I'll talk about in a moment. That's in Las Vegas in September. And then we have the Quality Assurance Symposium that would be in April. So the Institute this year has 3 seminar tracks. I just mentioned these 3 in particular. Mapping your quality assurance process across the board. Everyone can use that one. Designing assessment systems for continuous improvement. Again, a great one to just organize your thoughts with that assessment system. Making the case for reaccreditation. If you've already been through the accreditation process, this is a great one for you to get started with. So these are 2-day workshops. So you'll be with a group of people. You can bring teams and you'll get a discount for a team, but you can bring the team, split them up, or you can just bring one person for wherever you want to go, and really focus on what the specific need is, because these are 2-day workshops that you'll be attending here. And this is a 2-day workshop because we usually have this one at the Institute, and we were asked to offer it for another group of people. So it's open for anyone in Frederick, Maryland, October 15th and 16th. So that one will be available also. The Quality Assurance Symposium is a little bit different. This is where there's 45, 50, maybe peer-reviewed sessions. They're about 45 to 60 minutes each. So this is an opportunity for people to come and just get a taste for different things. But I'm going to say 98 to 99% members that are doing this presentation. We have, of course, a few non-members, but they're all from providers. And they are across the gambit about assessment systems, about quality assurance, about accreditation with AAQEP. So it's a great opportunity for you. You'll see proposals are due today. So if you're really, really good at writing, you might want to submit a proposal today. This is our professional learning events. We have a lot of events. We are always looking at what the evaluations say and what is needed. So we're constantly building out new events. So please let us know if there's something that you think is necessary. But getting started, you could be a reviewer, and you could be a proposal reviewer or on one of the teams. And you'll just contact me and I will help you to walk through. I do what is called a cost transition table so that I can give you an idea of exactly when to transition, what the cost will be all the way through till you get to your 7-year. So it's a great opportunity for you just to have a conversation with me. I also have conversations with faculty, with administrators, anyone where I can help to explain the process. What I always try to explain to people is that it's my role to give you the information so that you can make an educated decision. So the application online is pretty straightforward. You'll pay the membership dues, and then you have access to the resources and start in a cohort. I will stop for just a moment then and see if we have any questions, and stop the recording in just a second. I thank you very much for joining us today. And please, there is my contact information, l.mckee@aquep.org. Or you can look at the information aquep.org/IAP for the accreditation pathway. So thank you very much for joining me today. I'll stop the sharing.